After making so many undergarments and white cotton pieces, it was high time to create something warm and colorful. This rose and gray plaid wool, lovingly donated by a family member, became the inspiration for this entire Edwardian winter outfit. The pattern I used is from the Keystone Jacket and Dress Cutter, and there were 3 different fullness options. And initially I wanted to go for the medium fullness just because that seemed like a decent balance, but I quickly realized that the amount of fabric that I had meant that it would be a tight squeeze even if I did the slimmest option. Before cutting into my precious wool, I made a mock-up to ensure the pattern would fit well. I really don't like these. These are annoying. I don't know if you can see right here. There's like this weird something that's happening right there. Okay, so I think lengthening it to here will help a little bit. And we're actually going to do that and then try it on again. It's mock-up, take 2. This one with more pleats. This definitely looks smoother. Nice, okay. You can see this has got the little pucker. This is better, much better, okay. Finally, it was time to cut into my precious wool. This was both nerve-wracking and thrilling as I only had just enough fabric to squeeze this pattern into. To achieve the diagonal plaid on the front, I folded one edge of the fabric diagonally and carefully cut the 3 front panels in a single piece. This pattern has 4 panels on the skirt, and I believe that it says in the description that you can cut the seam wherever needed in order to make it fit your piece of fabric. And in general, I like avoiding as many seams as possible, so I was very happy to notice that I could fit the 3 front panels into a single piece. Lining the skirt was a deliberate choice for both practicality and durability. This entire skirt project was heavily inspired by Bernadette Banner's Sherlock Holmes skirt. I used the same pattern and I tried to use a lot of the same techniques. However, one thing I noticed was that in hers, she mentioned that it was common in this era to leave seams just raw, which I was originally going to do. However, I noticed that this wool that I'm using has a slightly larger thread size than a few of the other wool options, such as the one I'm going to use for the final part of this project. While it didn't necessarily unravel super easily on its own, it wasn't just falling apart in my hands, it was fairly easy to pick apart by hand, so I didn't want it to wear away quickly, so I wanted to finish all the seams as nicely as I could. Come here! Come on! Come here! Hi, buddy! What's up with you? Come on! Good boy. I know you don't usually like it when I pick you up, but you're being very patient. Thank you. This is Pavel. I rescued him as a kitten. Hi. Goodbye. So at the beginning, it was primarily to help add a little bit of stability to the skirt, and I had a few ideas for how I might be able to use the lining to finish the seams more nicely. I ended up going with this really elegant dark gray quilting cotton. It was a little bit stiffer than some of the other options, which would help with stability, and it just ended up working really nicely with the grays in the skirt. And also having a darker color on the lining would probably be less noticeable than something bright. Since I ended up with basically 2 panels on this skirt, I wanted to finish the seams as nicely as possible, and I figured one of the, I don't know if simplest is the right word, most efficient methods I could do would be to actually sew each panel with its lining right sides together and then turn it inside out, and you would have nicely finished edges. I made that seam between the lining. Excuse me, sir. How darest thou? I am speaking at this time. Do you need more snuggles? Come here. Hi, what's going on? I put the seam at a 1/4 inch away from where the actual final seam would be, so it would end up with a look kind of halfway between a regular sewn seam and French seams, because you'd have 2 pieces, but those seams would be nicely finished without having to go over it again with a bunch of felling or anything like that. And it worked beautifully. I'm so happy with how that part ended up turning out. No skirt would be complete without pockets, and I wanted to make sure that I had 2 in this skirt because why not be symmetrical for once? And these pockets are huge. You could stick your phone in them, you could put a book in them, you could put scissors in them. They're huge. And I also French seamed them so that, again, there are as few raw edges as possible. I also made sure that the top few inches were made with the skirt fabric so that the white cotton of the pocket would not be visible. I had a theory for how I might be able to add pockets to the skirt without any seams being visible from the outside and without any raw edges visible from the inside. And the way I would do this was by using the lining itself. And I tucked those raw edges between the lining and the wool so that it was neatly hidden. And in order to hide any of the seams, I actually sewed to the folded back section of the skirt wool first, and then I whipped it on from the inside. I also made sure to include a little bit of waist tape to connect the pocket to the waistband of the garment so it would not be pulling down on the seam of the skirt itself. And this was commonly done to help put the weight on the much sturdier waistband instead of pulling down the silhouette of the skirt. Once I had placed the pocket, I continued the dart a little further down so it was hidden quite nicely, and now you can barely see where that pocket is. It is beautifully invisible in this skirt, which I absolutely love, even though it's in a smoother section where you'd expect it to be more noticeable. Now, at this time, I believe it was quite common to use ribbon and other thinner fabrics to create the waistband. However, I wanted to be able to wear this skirt without having a belt or a vest covering it, so I wanted to use some of the wool of the skirt to create the waistband. And to do this, I actually cut a really long strip on the bias to basically create some bias tape for myself. I folded it in once and then twice in order to create as few layers as possible while still keeping things nice and crisp. And then I added it pretty much the same way you would bias tape. So I sewed it to the front first and then folded it over and whip stitched it in the back, and it created a beautiful and not too thick waistband. Once the main construction was complete, I wanted to let it hang on my dress form for a while just to let the fabric settle out, especially since the front and a lot of other portions of this skirt are on the bias to create that diagonal design. So I put it on my dress form and I just let it relax over the weekend so that once we put the hem in, it would be nice and even. And then onto the hem, I added this 1-inch wide black braid, which was similar to something that was used at the time to cover up the lowest edge of the hem, because it's much easier to take off a bit of tape and reapply a new one than it is to completely remake the skirt. So the braid is there to take all of the wear and tear as you're walking about wearing this nice long skirt, and the skirt underneath would be just fine. Now, I did not add any stiffening like horsehair braid to the hem of it, partially because this is a slimmer fit and it doesn't have a whole lot of volume that needs to be supported to create a really nice shape, and my petticoat was able to do that all on its own, so I did not feel the need to add any extra support to the hem. I couldn't be happier with how this skirt turned out. The rose and gray plaid feels timeless yet vibrant, and the silhouette is both elegant and practical. The slight fullness in the back adds a lovely swish when I walk, and the skirt is surprisingly comfortable, perfect for long days of sewing or even cutting fabric on the floor. I am so glad that I was able to check off so many goals with this skirt. I was able to have 2 pockets, I was able to have the waistband be of the same fabric, I was able to have all of these beautiful pleats in the back, and I was able to have it on the diagonal, which I really was not sure I was going to be able to do. This skirt was the entire reason that I wanted to make this whole ensemble in the first place, and as probably the most iconic piece in this set, I am so thrilled that it is both comfortable and feels practical and easy to wear. So stay tuned for the rest of this winter ensemble, and thank you so much for watching.